The very fact that our existence as a species is being threatened is a motivation for us, for you, for me. But we cannot just focus on the environment alone. The conquest of Mother Earth is part of a domination system. And the stories about blaming Eve or Pandora for all of our ills, those are false stories that have been introduced in order to maintain and strengthen and impose domination systems.
I'm Dale Walkonen, and this is Facing Future. Today, I'm honored to welcome Dr. Riane Eisler, systems scientist, cultural historian, and author of The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future, and The Real Wealth of Nations, Creating a Caring Economics. She is a member of the Club of Rome and president of the Center for Partnership Studies. Thank you so much, Riane, for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Riane, so many of us are reeling from the edicts hurled by the current U.S. administration, tearing up environmental advances and protections and partnerships with other countries, decimating caring systems that have been in place for decades, and targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Your advocacy of partnership systems rather than domination systems has inspired many other thinkers and movements for change. Do you see a path beyond the oligarchies that now dominate the U.S. and other political systems in our world?
Yes, I do. And I'm still working to really contribute to that path. I think that we are in a time, obviously, of regression to what I call the domination model. It's at the end of a partnership domination scale, and it consists of, well, strongman rule, but it's strongman rule in both the family and the state and all of our institutions, including economics. It is also, and this is something that we ignore, but that the people who are pushing us back, we see it, gender. This is one of the cornerstones of both partnership and domination systems. And rigid gender stereotypes, no gender fluidity, and yes, the ranking of the male form over the female form, and therefore the equation of difference with superiority and inferiority, with dominating or being dominated, with being served or serving. In other words, in-group versus out-group thinking, starting with that fundamental difference in our species, but then applied to a different race, to a different religion, and yes, to conquest and domination of our Mother Earth. So it's very clear that we have to focus on what I call the four cornerstones of either partnership or domination systems in order to shift those cornerstones from domination to partnership. Now, our job really right now is not to disrupt. As you pointed out, there is disruption of everything going on, and there is suffering, but it's not enough. Tactics are not enough because we put band-aids, we are defensive, right? We have to show that there is a better alternative. And it's really a whole systems analysis that is necessary for this partnership shift. And we have to have this new paradigm of no longer right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, capitalist, socialist, which we inherited from more rigid, authoritarian, violent dominator times. Uh, we have to have a change of paradigm. And this is the time when we really have to do that if we are to continue, because there are many trends towards partnership, but they're all isolated, aren't they? You know, there's the environmental movement here, and the racial movement there, and the gender movement here, and they're all really part of that shift, aren't they?
Well, Indivisible has tried to put all that together, that organization, which started during the first Trump administration. And I think Bernie and Alexandria AOC, Bernie Sanders and AOC are going around the country and drawing large crowds of people and talking about this kind of transition. But it seems to us in the environmental movement that this civilization anyway is tearing itself apart with fossil fuels, with animal agriculture, with the plastic industry, etc., polluting the world to such an extent that it isn't going to hold itself up anyway. And maybe this administration is just accelerating that catastrophic event until we have a world with far fewer people with a much degraded environment. Do you see that, or do you
Of
think there's
course,
a
I
way of
see that,
transitioning the
but
system?
I see that, but I also see that the first administration of this president created the Me Too movement, created the Black Lives Matter movement. But now it is the time to really create a partnership movement and work together, because, and our job is to shift the four cornerstones, starting with family and childhood. Why? Because we're dealing with trauma. You know, domination systems are trauma factories. I was interviewed by the Scientific American recently, and we talked about how families, starting in families, people are traumatized and our consciousness is either blocked or fragmented. And we have to really focus on changing violence. Look, Putin, and this is really not a question of women against men or men against women. It's a question of changing the system. But Putin, in 2018, lowered the penalty for family violence in Russia. He gets the connection, and so do the people pushing us back worldwide, because it isn't only happening here. The connection between a rigidly male dominated, punitive, violent family and that kind of a state.
Yeah, I mean, support for women who, have child time to be with the child, even men to be with the child, for goodness sake. Subsidies to provide for children, school lunches, these kind of programs, which we're slowly entering and becoming more widespread. Right now, it's having a big hit. They're getting rid of all the most incredible life supporting systems I can imagine. But there will be a time when this administration is gone in the United States, and possibly other administrations in other countries which have tended to be more right wing in recent years. So we can hope for some sort of pendulum effect, that are we ready? Will we be ready to present a new paradigm? And how will we do that?
Well, first of all, if we don't shift paradigms, and it isn't a question of right or left, these are categories. Look, there are both rightist and leftist systems, countries that orient more to the domination system, whether they're religious, like the Taliban, or like fundamentalist Iran. They have strongman rule. They inevitably and invariably focus on suppressing women and the quote feminine. I mean, you have
Well,
to
the
really
traditional
pay
family is a
attention.
male-dominated family that the Christian right in this country just loves. And we talk about traditional values. We're really talking about some pretty terrible values.
We're talking about domination values. And if we don't understand that the reason, because I wrote 2 articles for Compass, which is the journal of professional futurists, and I emphasized how the people pushing us back, like Putin, have a really very coordinated whole systems approach, starting in families, starting in childhood, focus on gender, whether it was Nazi Germany or Stalin's former Soviet Union, right or left, they focused on the suppression of women, particularly in families. But they got it. And we have to also connect the dots, which we haven't. Why? Not a fault of ours, but we've all been socialized. Look, in our universities, gender studies are only about 60 years old and they're marginalized, aren't they? Women's studies, men's
Also, Black
studies, queer
history studies
studies.
and
Yeah.
all
And
of
they're
that,
actually,
yeah. And the acceptance of LGBTQ people was something that we had moved ahead with, and now we're going way back again, taking them out of the military. It's terrible how how this is happening, but one has to see. You are a student of history, and you understand that there are these cycles of history. History moves in, doesn't move in a linear way. It kind of moves in jumps, like the environment, which is rapidly accelerating its, the crisis of the environment. Similarly with society, we're on the brink of so many crises, called the poly crises of our time, that it's hard to think how we are going to transition anytime soon in large numbers to a different paradigm. And of course, I always see women in the forefront of all the change movements. You go to a meeting of Indivisible, it's mostly women. You go to, whatever it is, women are really fighting hard to change the world, I think, at this time, have really come into their power. Do you see that?
yes, of course I see that. But the problem is that the feminist movement, and I'm a feminist, is a separatist, feminism. And it has been misinterpreted because there are many feminisms. And it has been misinterpreted as being anti-male. And it is not. It is really, the men's movement is integral to the partnership movement. Equimundo is working to help men become more caring. We have to convince men and show to men that the sop that they get, which is being the king of the castle of their homes, right, and dominating over women and children, is really only a sop that they have to give nothing less than their lives, because some guy on top wants more, like Putin, wants more real estate, right? Our job right now, look, the old systems are failing. We're failing. And what's happening today is, yes, the focus is on returning to rigid gender stereotypes, to returning to male dominance, to returning to domination of our Mother Earth. All of that is happening. But what's also happening is that the old systems were not and are not capable of meeting our unprecedented challenges. And I already pointed that out in the Chalice and the Blade, which is now in something like 57 US editions and about 30 foreign editions. The very fact that our existence as a species is being threatened is a motivation for us, for you, for me. But we cannot just focus on the environment alone. The conquest of Mother Earth is part of a domination system. And the stories about blaming Eve or Pandora for all of our ills, those are false stories that have been introduced in order to maintain and strengthen and impose domination systems.
Well, we have gods that are almighty and fearful beings that are up there to punish us and torture us. But we're not having wars where women and children are murdered and targeted. Whole cities, we have the thing in Gaza, which is so horrific. We have the thing in Ukraine, which is similar, where the country is gone. They're just taking it all out, and the people who are dying are largely women and children. This is kind of a most terrifying thing to witness in history, that the lack of concern for civilian populations, and we allow this wars to progress. Sudan, Myanmar, we're in many states of war against other populations. There's still that racism and an othering of other people. They are other. They are not really people. You see this in this country where Trump is the horrible treatment of people and throw them into this awful jail in El Salvador. It's just like, what? This is happening in America? This is not anything I would ever have expected 20 years ago. So we're going to approach a big problem with immigration because the climate change will affect countries in equatorial regions, and there will be a lot more migration. And this is very frightening to consider as we now have such furious backlash to people who come from other countries.
Look, the danger that we're facing goes much deeper. The wars that you mentioned, the immigration crisis all over, people fleeing, really climate change, poverty, that happened before the present administration in the United States. I draw a lot in my work from chaos theory, from nonlinear dynamics. And you have to really understand that traumatized people, particularly in times of rapid change, which is this regression is causing rapid change, become paralyzed. And we can't afford to focus on the negatives. Our job is to show that there is a better alternative, and also to focus not on symptoms, because what you're describing are all symptoms of a fundamentally imbalanced system. When I spoke to the United Nations in a session on harmony with nature, I said you cannot just tack on harmony with nature on a fundamentally imbalanced system. You have to change the system. So I am hopeful in this time, but it is grounded hope, grounded in scientific understanding of the interconnection. You know, that two physicists just got the Nobel Prize in physics for their work on entanglement. You mentioned nations that have been much more moving towards partnership. The Nordic nations, for example, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, they are moving towards partnership.
They were, but now there's a lot of Finland has gone a bit to the right, and they're they're not the utopias we would have liked them to be.
Well, utopia, we need new terms, new language. One of the four cornerstones is changing our stories and our language. So my work has introduced, look, we have to think outside the box, if you'll pardon the old metaphor here. We cannot afford to get entangled in all of the damage being caused by this regression. It's going to dismantle the old system and cause a lot of suffering, unfortunately. But we can use this time to show that there is a better alternative, a partnership alternative, and we can focus on the four cornerstones, which are family and childhood. We know from neuroscience. My latest book, which was published by Oxford University Press in 2019, is Nurturing Our Humanity. And I highly recommend it because it takes us to our time. And basically, neuroscience, which we get in bits and pieces. We get everything in this very fragmented way without a new frame. What it shows is that given half a chance, what we humans yearn for is caring connection. But this in-group versus, there's a lot of caring connection in the in-group, okay? But not the out group. But you know that the nations that have more parental leave, that have about 40% of the national legislatures, female women in leadership positions, that they invest more in helping people to whom they are not genetically related. This is one of the stories, selfish genes, original sin. It's the same story. They fight each other, but it's all about, well, selfish genes is about God fearing, isn't it? That we're bad and we have to be rigidly controlled from the top, as in God fearing. But selfish genes is the same story, isn't it? And it's not true because people can evolve, and we need to evolve to really use a whole systems approach. And that means focusing on these four cornerstones of family and childhood. We are doing, for example, on October 29, a summit called Peace Begins at Home, connecting the dots between, well, Putin connected those dots, doesn't he? Between violence in the home and war and terrorism and crime. Social violence. We have not been taught to do that. This is our opportunity to really focus on gender. As long as we have this model starting in families, and these are all interconnected, and economics, this whole argument between capitalism and socialism, and these Nordic nations are not socialists. They have a very healthy market economy, but they have moved towards partnership. We must show that it is both capitalism and socialism came out of the 1700s and the 1800s, times of much more rigid domination, authoritarian rule, certainly male dominance. And so they have this notion that caring is coded feminine, right? And it is devalued. We need to move to a caring economics of partnerism. And we have trends in that direction. We need to strengthen those trends. And I know that they're being dismantled right now in this country. But, and there's really an attack on women in this country, in the United States right now. Let's not, but this is the time to really understand the importance of gender and, of course, of story and language.
Well, our language, of course, is very violent. Our movies are violent. Our video games are violent. It's sewn into our society, this love of the macho, which has gone throughout history, as of course you know. I mean, we had Attila the Hun once upon a time. We've had all kinds of horrible people in the past, and somehow humanity has survived. The twist this time is that our entire ecosystem is
Precisely.
endangered.
And it's
So
not
it's
only
more
our
serious.
ecosystem, it's that we now have biological and nuclear weaponry.
Mhm.
Not to speak of AI, which is putting the whole issue of truth, what is truth, in question. We need this new unified paradigm if we're going to survive. And we need to really focus on showing that this paradigm is more, I can speak to it personally, because I had a partnership with my late husband, David Loy, who, by the way, wrote many books, including Rediscovering Darwin, showing, for example, that Darwin was used and misused as an 1,800-pound gorilla, really, to
Yeah.
maintain domination, whereas in The Descent of Man, and I really recommend David Loy's book, the well, first of all, I mean Darwin's Lost Theory, but also Rediscovering Darwin. We've got to change our stories because they're baked into us and they don't have to be. I mean, people who read The Chalice and the Blade, they tell me that they have a lot of these aha movements, as I did in doing the 10 years of research for that book, but it's multidisciplinary research connecting the dots.
Well, our system of food, for example, we recognize that if we shifted from the meat-centered diet that we have, the real man's food, to a plant-centered diet, we could salvage so much of nature and so much of habitat for the other animals, which we have largely wiped off the earth in favor of our food animals, mainly the cow. And people really very ferocious on this issue. You know, they really don't want to make that change, but it would be so crucial if we only did that.
There are many trends, and this is one of them, many ideas, but they have to be put together. And we have to focus, as I said, on these cornerstones, because the addiction to a beef centered diet is really, in The Chalice and the Blade, I show that it was hurting people. The story we've been told, for example, of Cain and Abel, it's backward. That it was the farmer who was killed by the herder, not the other way around. I mean, we have to know our history going way back into prehistory. And, there are books now talking about Çatalhöyük, which was more partnership oriented. For 1,000 years, there was no warfare. According to the University of Stanford, archaeologists who excavated, there was gender equity. I mean, you have to connect the dots. And we are not helpless. All of us, rather than just protesting, can show that there is and was a partnership alternative. There are trends to it. And I invite everyone to really support the Summit on Peace Begins at Home. And that is very, very important, because if we don't focus on family, like the people pushing us back are, I show that in the Compass articles, we cannot change the traumas that really keep people thinking and identifying with strongman rule and with male over female and, quote, masculine over feminine, so that caring is marginalized.
Yes, well, the caring of the world is what we need to be doing right now. The balance of nature and the balance of human beings has to come back into the fore, and we certainly hope that it does. Riane, it's been so wonderful to talk with you today. This is such an interesting conversation. I really appreciate your taking your time to join us on Facing Future. Thank you to our audience. And if you appreciate this video, can you like it and subscribe? We would appreciate that. It helps to spread the messages that we're trying to share. And thank you again, Riane.
Thank you.